Hi, this is Julie, and in our family right now, we're getting adjusted to two big milestones. Jacob has started kindergarten and Ryan is in high school. To start the year well, I made sure to invest in myself, to reflect on what matters and get grounded. And I know that helped them to start well. In honor of this critical time of year, I'm offering a special rate for a 90-minute clarity coaching session and would love to support you and your children to begin the year mindfully. Go to mothersquest.as.me/fall clarity session special, or click the link in the show notes to book your session by the end of August for this special rate. Wishing you and yours an ease-filled and intentional start of this school year. Now here's the show. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neale, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own. Hello, and welcome to this special episode of the Mother's Quest podcast, featuring a conversation I had with Sage Hobbs as a guest on her show, Naked Conversations. I loved all the themes that we discussed and wanted to introduce more of you to Sage's work and podcast. So I'm excited and grateful that she gave me permission to share in this way. This is the last of a series of previously released conversations that I'm bringing to you this summer as I've focused on time with my children and transitioning them to school these last few months. In 2 weeks, I'll be back with a brand new conversation, so make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that new episode comes straight to you. You can visit mothersquest.com/podcast to find all the podcast apps and channels where you can find Mother's Quest. Before I share more about this conversation, I want to introduce Rachel Rosen of Spark Leadership with this episode's dedication. Rachel was a guest on Sage's podcast as well, and I'll link to that in the show notes. And she's someone who was a guide to me as I started the Women Podcasters in Solidarity initiative, something Sage and I discuss in this episode. Here's Rachel.
Thank you so much, Julie, for inviting me to make this dedication. I'm particularly pleased and so thrilled because Sage is a dear friend of mine, and it's such a gift to be in this virtual space with you both. For those of you who don't know, I'm Rachel Rosen. I am the founder of Spark. I'm an educator, I'm a coach, and at the core, I'm someone who's committed to social justice, racial equity, and courageous leadership. And so Spark is a multi-tiered enterprise that really embodies my mission. It is both, we have products such as our signature product, which is a community building card game that's designed so everyone's story matters. We also have leadership development programs for equity leadership, and I do consulting work. At the core, I'm just on the mission. I'm really on a clear mission to shine a light on the importance of having space to share stories and to connect, to be engaging in critical reflection about unconscious bias and the roles that that plays in our lives, and really to bring people together in powerful ways. Your podcast is so aligned with my mission. It's been a gift to see the evolution of the podcast, especially this past year, and your commitment to racial justice and lifting up mothers in profound ways. I'm so inspired. To think about who to dedicate this episode to, it was so difficult because I'm so blessed to have a lot of inspiring mothers in my life. The first place I went was, of course, my mother. I'm very fortunate to have an amazing mother and a sister who's a mother, and I was drawn to think about them immediately. They are my rocks and my immediate family. And I want to spotlight, because exposure is so important, and because I believe perhaps there was a version of me 5 years ago that would have really loved to hear this spotlight. I want to spotlight two mothers who are in the LGBTQ community and who are also in interracial relationships. It's not every day that I see, as a lesbian woman in an interracial relationship, that I see my story represented or shined a light upon or shouted out. I just want to take a minute to appreciate and to dedicate this episode to two very strong women, two women who step out, show up, lead the way, who are founders of their own movements, Jillian Roth and Angela Ford. They're also Spark alumni, so it's been such a gift to be learning and leading alongside them and to have witnessed their evolution. So Jillian Roth, founder of Mama J Consulting and someone who coined the term intentional justice. Check out that hashtag and Mama J Consulting. And also Angela Ford, who is really trailblazing and leading so many movements about access and about opportunities for all. She's the founder of Angela Abundance and doing great work in the education arena. So I just wanted to take a minute and really shout them out and just remind everybody that sometimes the stories we don't hear are the very ones that we need to seek out. These two women are so inspiring. I mean, they are exemplars of mothers that love out loud, that live for justice, that model this relentless commitment to their children. It's just so beautiful to witness. And I think if I had seen their love in their family photos when I was a little girl or even a girl in college, maybe I would have thought differently about my future. Maybe I would have thought differently about what love looks like and what it means. So I want to honor them and lift them up in this moment and just say, I see you and I'm so grateful and feel very privileged to be in your circles and to have had your sparks of leadership impact my life. So I dedicate this episode to them.
Thank you, Rachel, for your commitment to courageous leadership, for creating the Spark card game, which I love using with my children and in my work, and for the beautiful dedication to Jillian and Angela. Sage and I cover so many of the topics that you raise in your dedication. Underneath them all is this idea of defining courage for ourselves, exploring how we've been expanding our leadership in more courageous ways, and how this helps us pursue a fuller expression of ourselves and our purpose. The theme is particularly resonant for me right now, as I've been stepping into new territory, advocating for 2 police accountability bills being deliberated on in Sacramento right now. And after I helped to bring a powerful play called Mothers, of mothers who've lost loved ones to police brutality, to Sacramento just last week. It's also resonant because in their own ways, my children have been stepping into more courage in their lives. Starting a brand new school, especially when you're differently wired, has required each of them to move out of their comfort zone and hold a positive picture of what's possible for them. My oldest son Ryan and I went on another milestone hike together just before his first day of school, where he recommitted to not letting fear stop him from living his YOLO life. My youngest Jacob and I have been doing some affirmations together as part of a Miracle Morning challenge happening in the Facebook group. And he chose this affirmation from a list of my own as one that he wanted to say each day this week. Like an alchemist, I transform fear into curiosity and excitement. I hope this episode gives you an opportunity to reflect on courage in your life and to find some inspiration to transform any fear you or your children have at this time of year into curiosity and excitement for yourselves. I'm Julie Neale, and this is Mother's Quest.
So, without further ado, I want to introduce you to today's guest. I have on the show today Julie Neale. And Julie and I met sort of through the internet, actually, through Facebook connections, which is unusual for me because I usually am a in-life type person. And it was like we were meant to meet. We had so many beautiful parallels in our interests and our passions and our life experiences. And finally having her on the show was just such a pleasure to get to know her and to go more deeply into her work and her vision of what she's creating. So Julie is a life and leadership coach and a facilitator. She's also a mom and a community builder. She's really dedicated to creating understanding and connections across differences. And lately, she's been stepping out even more into a role as an activist, which was really interesting to dig into on the show today. She has a 20-year career as a leader in youth serving nonprofit organizations, another commonality that we shared around youth empowerment. And she has, in recent years, turned her focus to coaching, where she created the Mother's Quest. It's a podcast show. It's also a community, and it's really about how we can support moms in living what she calls an epic life. And we define epic life on the show today. So definitely tune in for that, because it's, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, I want more of that myself. I'm going to look at those guideposts for how I live my life. Regardless if you're a mom or not, they are incredible measures for how we're really showing up in the world. She also launched something called Women Podcasters in Solidarity, which we talk about a bit on the show, and I was honored to be a part of, and just love watching women like Julie who really are stepping out and speaking out more actively about things that really matter to them. So without making you wait any longer, here we are with Julie Neale. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Naked Conversations. I'm so excited for today's talk with a lovely and inspiring woman named Julie Neale. Thank you so much for being here, Julie.
I'm really excited to be here, Sage.
So Julie and I met on the interwebs, actually. And then, as luck would have it, we have several beautiful people in common, and it just felt like her story and her work was something I really wanted to share with this community. So I'm excited for you to learn from her today. Julie, I always start with the same question and then we go from there. And as I warn people, if you've listened to the show, you know this is Naked Conversations. So we kind of let it take its path and its course in the way that feels most real and authentic to the two of us. But I love this question to anchor us. It is, what does courage mean to you?
I love this question too. And it's funny because, as you know, I have my own podcast. And the first question of my podcast is always asking people about their childhood and the impact that their mother has had on them.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
a big, juicy one to open it up.
It takes us deep really fast. And I think it's a great way to, just jump right in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually listening to your episode with a mutual friend of ours, Rachel Rosen, last night. And I heard you ask her about what courage meant to her. And she had such a beautiful response. And so I've actually been thinking about it since then.
Nice.
And I love more than anything to also engage my children in these questions. And driving to, school or activities is such a great place to have it. So this morning on the way to school, I was talking to my older son, Ryan, who's almost 14, about courage. And
that's awesome.
He said, to start with him first, that courage is moving through something that you're afraid of in service of something that matters. And I really loved that.
That's what your 14-year-old boy said?
That's what my 14-year-old said.
Ugh.
Yeah, he's wise beyond his years. This is part of why I ask him, it's the chicken or the egg thing. I don't know if he's so articulate and self-aware because I've asked him these questions all of his life, or if, it's the other way around.
I always say as a mom that we're always going to take all the blame, so we also may as well take some of the credit.
Yes, I will definitely take some credit.
Yeah, you had part of that. It's beautiful.
Not all. I really resonated with that too. And then, we went a little bit deeper, and I was asking him, are there moments where he has felt he had to step into courage? And he was reflecting on this time at vacation. He's actually afraid of anything that moves. Fish, animals, butterflies. And we had gone snorkeling this year in October. It was actually in a confined area in Orlando. So it was the safest place to try to do it. And he was really afraid, and he did it anyway. So he was reflecting on that this morning, that he was able to do it even though he was so scared. And when I asked him what pushed him through, he said the alternative, to have left and not done it, felt worse to him. And so in that case, the in service of something that matters to him was his ability to not let fears stop him from living a more full life, or as he calls it, his YOLO life. So I thought I would start with that story, but then I do have some personal reflections on this too.
Yes, please.
The definition that I shared with him is that I think that courage is standing in your truth and power in the face of fear for love. That's what came to me. And I also was connecting a lot with a moment that I remembered recently just before I launched my podcast and after Trump was elected, when I had been feeling in a lot of despair and also having a lot of creative resistance to getting my voice out and this, new thing that I was creating in the world. And I had this memory of I think I was maybe like 7 or 8, and I've always been a sort of petite, small girl at home. And we had this long driveway and a dog that lived at our neighbor's home that whenever I would walk up the hill home from school, that dog would be like chasing me up the chain link fence, like it just wanted to tear me apart. And so I had like a fear of it. And, just would try to stay away from it and get away as quickly as I possibly could. And one day my dog, who I absolutely loved, got out, and that dog was out, and my dog was attacked. And as we were getting ready to put her in the car and go to the vet, that dog that I had been so afraid of trotted up the hill. And I remember standing at the top of this driveway, like this, and I remember feeling like I was small and just standing there and yelling at this dog, like, I hate you, go away, you can't hurt us. And I don't know where that came from, because typically I would have been petrified to be in the presence of this dog without the fence. But it like looked at me and ran down the hill. And so, but really it was my love for my dog that enabled me to stand in that way and find this like strength in me and a way of speaking to somebody that I had definitely never had before. Yes. So that's what was coming to me today. And there have been so many things, in the last year or so since I launched Mother's Quest and in today's political world that have also called upon me to stand in truth and power and have conversations I haven't had before. And I think it is, because of the things I love and value that I'm willing to do it.
That is a really beautiful answer. And I can see where your son gets his wisdom. Really. I mean, just the reflection of how we're called forth in certain moments or incidents in our lives, what that calls out in us, this idea of standing in your truth and power in the face of fear for love is not so different in the sense of for something that matters, right? For you, what really matters is love.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So with that, for those who have never met you before, Julie, or don't know of Mother's Quest, can you tell us a little bit about your work and your path to creating and launching this endeavor?
Yes, absolutely. Well, Mother's Quest, I say, is my for-purpose venture that provides inspiration, coaching, and community for moms who I say want to live an epic life. And epic for me has multiple layers. One, I had been listening to Elizabeth Gilbert and others talk about the hero or heroine's journey. And that planted seeds in me for thinking more about my own life. And I felt like I was living a very full and wonderful life. But I also felt like there were things that I wanted to do, which I call like these whispers, that I hadn't been following through on or I wouldn't pay that much attention to. And in some ways, I feel like I got a little bit lost in motherhood, as I think, can happen with so much of our attention and focus on our kids. So I decided one day that I didn't want to just listen to the whispers, and that I was going to step forward and live an epic life that felt epic to me. So my version of an epic life, not somebody else's version, not what I thought it should be, but that it would be filled with all the things that matter most to me. And that I have this picture of like someday when I'm, with maybe my grandchildren, I could tell them stories about my life and all the things I did where maybe I, even in the face of fear, I stepped forward and took the action based on the things that really matter to me. So EPIC has that connotation, and then it also is an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that life when we're raising our children. So each letter stands for something that I felt like I had been on a quest on as a mother and a woman in my own life. And so that's become the guiding framework for the podcast. When I interview other women, we delve into these guideposts, and then my coaching circles, and even my morning, I have a morning practice where I do a little bit of reflection before I start my day, and I kind of check in on these guideposts and how they're showing up for me in my life. So that's the larger backdrop. And how I got to this path is that I am a life and leadership coach. I worked in the youth development and community building field for about 20 years. And I think you've worked with young people as well, right?
I know. We have a lot of parallel experiences, you and I. Like the more we talk, the more I'm like, oh yeah, of course we found each other, you know? Yeah, I spent 10 years as a school counselor, and my master's is in counseling psychology. And so youth and families, actually even 10 years as a school counselor, then some years before that in youth work, not in the schools, you know? So it was my first love, and it taught me, I'm sure you can say similarly, it taught me so much about who I am, how I want to advocate, how I want to speak up, how I want people to be able to have agency in their lives,
100%.
you know, many things.
Yeah, I feel like I really grew up and became who I am while working in organizations alongside young people. And so that was also a major influence. The organization that I worked for over 12 years and I'm still connected with, I facilitate circles for them. They held this belief that if they were helping young people, many of whom lived in low-income communities facing a lot of challenges, that if they felt they were trying to help these young people step into their own leadership and really grow personally, that the adults needed to be doing that work themselves.
Yes, I wish more organizations took that on. Really.
Right.
You know, that we need to model. Sometimes I think we expect these things of young people that we haven't figured out for ourselves at all. And I'm like, why should we expect 14-year-olds and to lead us?
Exactly.
When we haven't done it ourselves. It's beautiful.
And that is the part of the premise of Mother's Quest too, is that, if we want our children to be living their fullest lives, that they will learn much more from what they see in our own example than what we tell them. So along the way, since I launched Mother's Quest, first and foremost, it's a commitment to my own growth and my own quest. And then I'm just really open and transparent about sharing it and inviting other people into it and inviting my children to kind of come along too in different ways through having conversation with them. And I've also brought them along to different opportunities that have happened for me since living my epic life. And so it really just feels like an extension of my life. It doesn't feel like work necessarily. And it definitely feel like I'm on purpose. Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life right now.
Oh my gosh. And we could go off on that, even just how we find our sense of purpose. But before we do, I really want to tease out a little bit more of that idea, because I love this idea of an epic life. What are the 4 guideposts that you mentioned that sort of, let's tell people. Let's tell them.
Sure. So E stands for engaged. And that is always the first thing I have been thinking about as a parent. How can I be engaged mindfully with my children?
Gosh, yeah.
And after that, the next thing that always comes to me is then, okay, what is also beyond my children and beyond my family? So P stands for passionate and purposeful. And that's about the impact that you make beyond your family. I stands for invested in yourself. So that's where all of the focus on self-care, growth, learning, joy, fulfillment all falls under I. And then the last guidepost, C, stands for connected. And that's about being in community on your journey, really building all of the relationships, finding your guides, just loving your people so that you are not isolated, but you're connected as you move through your life journey.
Oh, those are so good. Those are so good. And again, we resonate on several. When I wrote Naked Communication, it was really about our relationships being the foundation of our personal happiness and our professional fulfillment. And that they're really at the end of our lives. The thing we look to more than anything else is, was I deeply loved and did I love deeply? And if you were living an epic life, I feel like that would lead you there, right? It would lead you into community. It would lead you into passion and purpose within yourself and beyond yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that on. I'm taking that on. You just got another one in your world, Julie, because I'm excited about those 4 guideposts. So
fantastic.
Tell me a bit about this. You said a few things that I think for those who are mothers or parents listening, and we don't have all moms listening, but many, this idea of losing yourself to motherhood and what it looks like to come back to passionate and purposeful impact beyond your family. And if you're not a mom listening or a father listening, I think you could still speak to this in terms of when we lose ourselves in life with what we should do, sort of the hamster wheel, the grind, other people's expectations of us. There's lots of times where we can lose our inner compass. And I'd just love you to speak a little bit more to what that looked like for you, and then how this idea of passion and purposeful impact beyond your family came from that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I haven't mentioned yet that contributed to this sense of losing sight of maybe my passion and purpose in the fullest expression is that, one, my oldest son, when he was under 2, we realized that he had some serious developmental differences. And now, we refer to him as differently wired. But that was, a pretty overwhelming shock to us at the time and required a lot of my focus and attention, ultimately to help him reach his fullest potential. Thank goodness for my husband, who was able to help me hold that frame at the time, because there was so much fear of the future and uncertainty about what might be true for him. So for many years, there was just a tremendous amount of focus on, all kinds of therapy and intervention and just helping him to succeed. And then when it came time to look to having a second child, we had 5+ years of infertility, and we were on a major quest just to conceive.
Yeah.
So I think, where this may relate to anybody, even if you're not a parent, is that, life can often present you with challenges and even tragedies and things that you're not expecting, things that you didn't, it's funny. One time I saw this book after a really hard day with Ryan. I was at the car wash, and there was a book. They have all these interesting books at the car wash. Do you have one of those where you live?
I'm like, I need to go to your car wash. It's never that fun when I go.
Our car wash is a really interesting place with gifts and books. And so there was a book called This Is Not the Life I Ordered. And I felt like it just jumped out. Maybe you can link to it.
Yeah, I will, for sure.
Jumped out into my hands. And that was how I was feeling. This is not what I signed up for. Mm-hmm. And so I think when things like that happen and require you, to focus in certain ways that you weren't expecting, you can lose sight of some of the other things that you really value.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think there was a point of kind of coming through that. And some of it is just timing. I'm not sure that I would have been in the space to create what I'm creating now when we were in the early intensity of either of those two challenges. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like I wouldn't be the person that I am now had I not moved through them.
Yes, 1000%. I've asked other people on my show, actually it was just Sarah Snyder, I believe, who was just on recently, about this idea of the lessons that we glean in challenges or tragedy. And I too had a major infertility struggle. So you and I, again, another parallel.
Wow.
And I also had cancer when I was 23. And there have been various things in my life that have pushed my edges, right? To really pay attention to how I want to live. But I will say, in the moment, those lessons aren't always clear. And I guess this is my question. What do you think of this idea of challenges and tragedies shaping who you are, and how we get to them? When did you arrive at that conclusion for yourself? Was it when you were in it, afterwards? When did that show up for you? Oh yeah, that's how I got shaped by that experience.
Right. This is what I think about that. So, this whole idea of the heroine's journey, I've been having conversations about it with people who come on my podcast. And I don't know if you know Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin.
I don't
know her yet.
Mm-hmm. But
I'll share you the episode that I did with her, but she is also a coach and a former Wall Street attorney. And after, the election, she started doing these daily resistance lives where she could kind of break down, especially with her law experience, what was really happening, what was happening in the courts, what's happening in all of the politics, and also help direct people to where we can, take action and how we can be advocates. Mm-hmm. And she is, was definitely a light for me over the last year as I've stepped into more activism, which is also something that's been newer for me. So she came on the podcast and we talked about the heroine's journey. And, she said what's different about the heroine's journey from the typical depiction of the hero's journey is that in the hero's journey, you go on this challenge and you end up moving through the dark tunnel, and then you eventually get through it, and there's some prize that you then bring back to your community at the end. And with the heroine's journey, you're constantly in this circle and this cycle of learning things along the way and bringing it back to your community. And I really resonated with that. And I think that is true, that all along the way, I was learning things and I was sharing them. But there were also moments, like I think the moment where I was finally able to say yes to creating Mother's Quest, where maybe there was like more of a sense of completion of the circle, or, you know, something a little different, or the spiral kind of bringing me up to the next level. So
I love it. So it's really, it's both. I've never actually heard it spoken of that way. And that gives me a really fresh perspective, because there's a part of me that's kind of like, don't ask somebody while they're in pain and suffering. And I have a, background in counseling. Please don't ask them while they're really in it, or tell them that there's going to be a silver lining. That there's a piece where I feel like we need to pause and have compassion for the experience, for the pain and suffering and fear of the moments. And you're 100% right that even while in it, there's some profound wisdom and learning that can be shared. And I love that with women, and I love men too, so this is not better than, it's just the way that I find we tend to be is collaborative and in community so naturally that it doesn't even occur to me or to you not to share our experience and our lessons and our wisdom throughout the entire process, even when it is painful. Right. I'm so grateful to be a woman for that reason.
Yeah. And I've been aware lately that, people connect though in different ways, and some people are more introverted. I'm sure that does look different for everybody, but I think there is this kind of hardwiring for connection and communication that is different.
Absolutely. And, introverts love connection too. They just don't fuel their, they're not going to go to a party and feel energized necessarily, but on the one-to-one and in those beautiful, sometimes deep, soulful relationships, I think the desire is still there. Like you said, it just might look different. They're not screaming from the mount, or like I may be.
They may not want to do a podcast.
Right, exactly. Or take to the stage. And that's fine. We need all different kinds of voices in these bigger conversations. So I love that you already touched on this, and I want to go deeper with activism. Something that really drew me to you was an initiative that you started around having your podcast give voice to causes and messages you believe in. And you just said that this is sort of new for you, and I didn't know that. So will you tell us a little bit more about how activism has become a more active part of your life's work at this point?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I should say that, caring about social justice and community building and youth development, communities of color, has been a value of mine since the first job I had out of college was working for this incredible organization in downtown LA called Heart of Los Angeles Youth. And so it's not that I haven't been connected in some way to these issues, but I always did it in sort of my way. So, I'm part of an organization, and for many years I was a fund development director. So I would write grants, but then, I would go home to my community, which is not as diverse as the communities that I work in. And, certainly on social media, in terms of like the Facebook posts I would share, I remember for years I would see posts that were, talking about these, some other issues, and police brutality is one of the issues that I ended up stepping more into. But I think I would see the articles and it wouldn't occur to me to share it. I would think I was just afraid. I was afraid of judgment on like either side. And certainly actually voicing or speaking or having a conversation about these issues was not something I felt comfortable doing. I think I was just afraid I was going to screw it all up.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wait, pause, because that's so good. I can't let you go on before we dig into that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's what holds so many people back. And I've felt it inside of myself as well, where people think of me as being outspoken, but I can feel inside of myself where I also haven't been as much as I would like to be. So, and it's been heated times for those listening now in early 2018. It has been an intense period of our recent history. So opinions are high, emotions are high, right?
Right.
But I just so respect that you said that you said I was scared of judgment from both sides and fearful of stepping into it. So I have several questions, but the first one really is, how did that change? What was the thing that made you go, it's time for me to weigh in here?
So, first of all, I noticed that just that question made me emotional.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode about love, standing for love. I have a friend whose husband I worked with for years at that youth organization, Alternatives in Action. Her name's Genji Heiston, and she had posted a Facebook Live after the death of one of the Black men that was killed by a police officer, where she was in tears and just saying, to my white friends, I want you to just even imagine what it would feel like to fear for the safety of your Black husband, your Black sons, your Black brother when they walk out the door on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that human connection and her vulnerability that caused me to, at that moment, I think what I did was I actually called her and I left her a message. And I said, I just want you to know that I heard your live and I couldn't listen to that and not reach out to you. And I don't know what I can do, but I just want you to know if there's anything I could possibly do, please, I would love to talk to you about it. And she didn't call me back for weeks. And when she did, we had a really honest conversation. And she was like, honestly, I don't really know what to tell you. But we agreed to be in connection and conversation. And she ended up being one of my earlier podcast guests. And we had a really profound set of experiences that happened through that. But I think it was really that sense of human connection that got me to realize, she's dealing with literally the fear of her loved ones. I can deal with the fear of sharing some posts or saying something. I mean, it feels like so minuscule in comparison.
Right.
But it is what started to get me moving. That was the first pivotal thing.
Well, I want to make sure to link to that episode. I'd love to share that episode with her in the show notes of this show. And I think that's huge. It's the human connection and the power of story. When people really, really express themselves in a vulnerable way and tell a piece of their story. And again, I'm just actually having a little bit of a weird tingly sensation, Julie, because I literally feel like you and I are having some really parallel experiences. And I do not tell this to all the guests. This is I'm in this women's circle. And one of the things I keep speaking to is this desire to return to some of my own sort of activist roots, where I feel like I used to be more engaged, and a little bit in the season of life that I've been in with my 2 young kids and career, and less so, and looking for what that might look like in my life. And I'm giving a talk actually next month at my son's school, and it's scary because it's my son's school, right? So stepping into a community that knows you one way, where you want to be liked and accepted. It's going to be my daughter's school next year. I'm going to be at this school for a really long time, Yeah. I'm giving a talk on how to raise culturally competent kids. And that's a big topic, right? We're going to look at the main 8 cultural identifiers. And I have to tell you, it's pushed my edge quite a bit of being afraid of judgment. Am I expert enough? I live in a community of so much privilege. How much do I help them see that in an hour and a half? You know what I mean? And yet I feel it was a long process to make this happen. And I hesitated along the way. And I kept getting nudged by women in my life who've known me for a long time that no, of course you're going to do this. This is what needs to be done. This is a conversation that needs to happen. And so, I really feel that. And for those listening, it is each of us having the courage to just go for it in some ways and speak up and try to, even if it's imperfect. I think when it comes to police brutality, it sometimes can feel even scarier because it's like you said, it's not your particular family that is targeted. So how did you choose that cause? How did that cause come to be? I find that a lot of women are very overwhelmed with where and how to even use their voice and take action. And I sense a lot of clarity from you. And I just wonder if you could speak to how that cause rose to the top and what that has looked like for you.
Yeah. So, well, and I'll give a little bit more information about Women Podcasters in Solidarity.
Please.
Which is that, so it really was this first conversation with Genji that got me started. And then I think it was the death of Philando Castile. Each time it was like, I think it just like shed another layer of, I don't know if I should use this word, if you'll have to edit it out, but like a layer of the bullshit.
Oh, I swear all the time. Every one of mine has explicit things. So.
That gets in the way from me, like really stepping forward, like back to in my truth and power. So, learning about his death. And then I saw a video of such a heart-wrenching video of Diamond Reynolds, who was his girlfriend, and her 4-year-old daughter in the back of a cop car after he had been shot. And what they did was they handcuffed Diamond Reynolds and then put her and her daughter in the back of a cop car after they just saw, who was essentially her father figure, murdered.
I remember that. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
And it was just so heartbreaking. And this little girl was the same age as my younger son at the time. And, saying like, Mom, stop yelling. Shh, be quiet. I don't want anything to happen to you. I'll protect you. And just the whole thing was, you can't watch that as a mother and not feel some sense of common humanity and like, oh, this has to stop. So that happened. And so I think after that, I started saying to myself, like, I need to do something. And I didn't know the answer. I was like, I don't know what I could do. But I do know how to reach out to people who can be guides, and I know how to have, authentic, honest conversation. And that's what I'll do. I'll commit to having a series of conversations on my podcast. I'll figure out who I'm supposed to talk to. And I didn't know at the time any of those answers, but I'll just start doing it. And then I figured, well, if I can do that and I have a platform, there's so many other amazing women podcasters who I've been meeting. And maybe I could inspire some other people, particularly other people who wouldn't ordinarily have these conversations, to commit to doing the same thing. And so that's how Women Podcasters in Solidarity was born. And the idea behind that now is that, we can use our platform to shine a light on different social justice issues. And just the first issue that I decided, because, to take on was anti-racism and police brutality. And that was just, because that's what I was sitting with as a result of these different things that I just described that had been showing up for me.
Yeah.
But I did want to say that one of those incredible guides that I found is a woman named Nicole Lee, who is a human rights attorney and an inclusion specialist. And she also does a lot of work with parents to talk about how to have courageous conversations about race. And so if you haven't heard my episode with her on the podcast or, kind of tapped into some of her resources, I think that could be really helpful for you as you're getting ready to do your courageous conversations at your tough school. But one of the things that she shared with me that really shifted things was to hold a growth mindset around this work. That there's so much in the education sphere about holding a growth mindset for our children, essentially that they should learn that it's not about getting it right that matters the most. It's sort of grappling with whatever's challenging and being willing to make mistakes. That's the way that you learn. And so, Nicole invited me to hold a growth mindset around these conversations. And that's what I do now when I have these conversations. I know that things are going to come out not exactly right. And a couple times I've committed to also not editing some of those conversations.
That's huge. What a beautiful way to take the idea of growth mindset and use it for ourselves. I mean, they're talking about growth mindset quite a bit at my son's school, actually. And, I'm watching him practice it. Like, oh, I'm really not that good at this math yet. He'll add yet at the end. And I'm like, oh, yes. What if somebody were, I wish I had had more of that as a child, because I know in my work, both in the women I interview on my show and the clients I coach, I mean, they're bright, amazing, passionate women whose self-doubt and perfectionism still trips them up so much. Yeah. And I put myself in that camp at times, right? It holds us back from shining most brilliantly and really being of service in our biggest, best way. So I love the idea of that, especially around hard topics like police brutality, race, equality, equity, all of the things that would fall into a social justice arena. oh my gosh, if we don't have some growth mindset, I've thought about it as self-compassion, for my own messing up, but I like growth mindset better because it's like,
Right.
It's flexibility, it's curiosity, it's inquisitiveness. It's like we're on this path and there isn't a perfect answer.
Yes. And she also really encourages you to hold that when you're having conversations with your children about race, so that they realize that it's okay for them to come to you, that it's okay for them to name something that maybe like isn't, ultimately you'd like them to move beyond whatever that thought or those words are, but that you're a safe place for them to share.
Yeah, that's huge.
So
it's huge. It's one of the tenets of the talk to that I'm giving is around our school does a pretty good job of bringing some of these conversations into the classroom, and we want to be a bridge at home. We want to be able to continue the conversations and not shut them down because of our own fear or because they're not going as we would have hoped or because we're uncomfortable. Like how can we encourage lifelong learners of equity and cultural competency issues? How can we encourage our kids to really be curious so they can thrive in a diverse world? I mean, we're a little off topic, but I think it's a really hugely valuable component so that we have more people who are activists, who are allies, who are speaking up. We're raising them.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I'm inspired by what you're doing, and I would love to hear, as you create it and after you do it, how it went and what you learned, from a growth mindset perspective.
I will, from a growth mindset perspective. Man, I've already grown a lot in the process of creating it and bringing it to the school, and all the parents who've asked me questions about it. It's been very fascinating. It's very, again, I don't know if you have found this, but as soon as you step into something, the opportunity for that something to become something else, it's like a snowball effect. Like as soon as you start living your epic life, have you found that there are more invitations for you to step into that epic life further?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's been incredible, all the things that have opened up for me. So just to, a small example, I reach out to Elizabeth Crins McLaughlin and have this conversation on my podcast, somebody who I admire but don't really know. As a result of that, she was doing a tour where she was meeting, the people that have been, I think she has like 50,000 followers now who listen to her daily Resistance Live.
Wow.
And so she was going around the country to actually be able to meet these mostly women, but some men. And she came to the Bay Area and she needed somebody to interview her live. And she asked me to do it as a result of, the conversation we had. And I had never done anything like that before. But it was a great experience. And now she has a conference coming up in May in Santa Barbara, and I'm going to be a panelist at that conference. So, speaking of the snowball effect, and I've now since then met so many people connected to her and who have now become an extended part of my community, just as a result of me reaching out to somebody who I admire, who might have said no, and who I was a little intimidated, it's that feeling of nervousness about, oh my God, I'm having a conversation with her.
Oh, yes. It's so good.
Yes.
It's so good there too, because I've talked a lot about this in my work, the power of just asking, right? And how we're really not conditioned as women, in my experience. And I grew up in a very in my household, I was conditioned just to speak up. That was actually celebrated and honored. I'm so grateful. But I've really learned as I'm in my latter years that societally, we really are conditioned to play it safe, be nice, not make waves, not ruffle feathers, not disappoint, as women more than men in some ways. And so that making requests thing, it's not as easy for us. And there are ways to do it where it's more likely to be effective than not. And you nailed it with this piece of just total authentic outreach, right? Just the way that you asked her and what has come of that would not have even, wouldn't have happened if you hadn't courageously made a request.
Yeah. And I think also that other premise about Mother's Quest, about when we do that in our own lives, the impact that can have on our kids. My son Ryan was able to watch the progression of all of that. And he actually came to hear me interview Elizabeth that night and was able to ask her a question. And his whole awareness around politics and how to communicate was expanded as a result of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so not only are you modeling how to be courageous and how to be outspoken and how to be an activist and how to make requests, then you're also broadening his worldview, through the experiences that you're now having and participating in.
Exactly.
It's profound. And it's how it gives me hope for where we're headed when more of us can step into that space. So thank you for modeling that for the people in your community and for those listening. It's really, you make it sound like it's really easy. I'm wondering if there have been times where it's just been absolutely terrifying.
Well, I will say that being a fund development director for a nonprofit organization got me very comfortable asking for things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because when I ask, even when it's for like my own podcast, I really feel like whatever that conversation is that's going to happen is going to be of service and of value, definitely to whoever's listening. But I also hold that the conversation is going to be of value to the person I'm interviewing. So, I hope, and I've seen that at the end of the conversation, they leave with greater awareness and insight about their own lives that they didn't have before. So I have that always as the backdrop when I ask.
Which makes it a lot, again, this is a deeper one, right? But this is so fascinating because what you've done is couch it so it doesn't feel selfish or greedy or about you, narcissistic, whatever the words would be. You make it about service. And that's so empowering because it gives more courage behind the question. But it also leads me to this question of, what if it was just for us? So, why is it that also hard for us as women to make requests that might be just because we want or desire something? I just think that's interesting, right? That we still find it easier to make requests if it's in behalf of the greater good. Well, what if it was just, because you wanted it?
I think that is still a growth edge for me.
Exactly. Well, you can take that one with you and think about it. And then what do you want to ask your husband for? So this all leads me to this thing I've been really digging into more on the show lately and enjoying a lot is this idea of women in leadership. And when I hear you speak, it's really clear to me that you have stepped more into your leadership in a whole nother level. You've led in different ways throughout your career. Right. But it sounds to me like this idea of finding one's voice is also really about leading. So what have you discovered about yourself or uncovered about women in their roles as leaders?
I'm thinking about that. Well, okay. One thing that's coming to me immediately is this idea of permission. So I think for me, the very first episode I recorded, which was a solo cast called Planting Seeds for Mother's Quest, I reflected on all the different experiences that brought me to that moment of essentially being able to step into leadership in my own life in a way I had never done before. And one of the things that happened was that I went to a creative writing workshop that Elizabeth Gilbert was giving.
Ooh, awesome.
And it was another one of those things like in life, it's just so strange and random. Like I think it was the first one she had ever done. It was in Napa. It was not very expensive. And it was just like an incredible, I don't even know how I found that.
And but you got yourself there. You also got yourself there.
I got myself there it was a 44th birthday present to myself.
Yes.
Totally out of the norm to do something like that, like just buy a ticket. I wasn't going with anybody. Told my husband, like, okay, I'm going to Napa for the day. But this was around the time that she came out with that book, Big Magic. Mm-hmm. And she had us writing letters to ourselves from different parts of ourselves. And one letter was a letter of permission that we were writing from that part of ourselves that's like the chief architect or the principal or whoever it is that you hold in your mind is the one that, would give you permission to do something. And I didn't realize until I went to record that solo cast that it was the letter of permission that I wrote to myself that day for my 44th birthday that I think had set in motion what a year later became me launching the podcast as a 45th birthday present to myself. So I think that it's like being willing to actually give yourself some space. Like, first of all, to say yes to things that are just for you. So I guess that was a time in my life where I did do that, and giving yourself the reflective space to really get in touch with what do you want, and then to realize that you actually don't need permission from somebody else, that you're the one that needs to grant it for yourself.
Oh, that's so good. Say that again. You don't need permission from anyone else.
From somebody else. You're the one And I don't know if you want to hear another story that is, I don't know where we are in the timing, but
well, no, I do. But I want to just ask this first, which is, I mean, before I asked you that question, if I had said, do you think of yourself as a leader? What would you have said?
Sorry. So if you asked me that before I
said before I just spoke to you about what is women in leadership and how did you get here? I mean, if I had just said, because you've named yourself an activist, a fun developer, somebody in social justice, a podcaster.
Would I have called myself a leader?
Yeah.
I don't think I would have. Yeah, because I think, or maybe I would have said I'm a behind the scenes leader.
Mm-hmm.
So I very much identified with being in service to other people's vision or mission and being more of a behind the scenes person. Now, interestingly, when I shared with all the people that I worked with all these years about what I'm doing with Mother's Quest and living my epic life and how it feels different to me, that I felt like before I, hadn't been willing to share my voice or really, take leadership or initiative to create something, they reflected back to me all these things I had done.
Yes, exactly.
So the truth is that I had been creating and leading, but I wasn't holding myself in that way.
Okay, great. That's what I wanted to get to. I was curious because I've found that often that we don't even think of ourselves in those terms, or it feels to me like there's a downplaying of even the behind the scenes part, like that there's a way a leader should look. And therefore, if we're quieter behind the scenes in the supportive role, and that, of course, all these people who've known you for these decades of dedicated work and service that you've provided see the ways you've led initiatives and led. And I think I'm starting to sort of reclaim leadership for all of us, no, actually we are. This is important. We are needed. It's so needed. These conversations that are done in our own way with our own touch, but that they are leadership conversations in their own right. So I hereby want you to call yourself a leader and consider all the ways that you can give generously to others and in your community as well as to yourself,
Yeah.
So what's that story you wanted
love that.
You want to leave us with that story, Julie?
I can leave you with the story. So the day that I said yes to living my epic life happened to have been a year anniversary from the day that I did a Mother's Quest pilot workshop. And I was coming home to my house with my little guy, Jake. We dropped my older son off at school, and Facebook gave me that reminder. You know how it tells you like memories, like,
oh yeah, a year ago today. Right.
Exactly. It's been 1 year since you did your Mother's Quest workshop. And I looked at that and I just felt immediately the sense of like, just like I felt totally trapped within the confines of my own fear or lack of initiative or whatever it was that stopped me from, in an entire year, not moving forward something that I knew deep down was my calling. And we walked into the house and we immediately heard this crashing sound. And it turned out that there was a bird that had gotten trapped in our house, which is very strange that it even happened because we only have this one little front door. So somehow I think, when we came home from the drop off, I had gone back to the car to pick something up. Somehow that bird flew in the door.
Gosh.
And it was very jarring because it kept like smashing, and we ran upstairs and we were like, oh my God. And then I realized, okay, I just need to calm down. I just need to go downstairs and open the door. And so I opened the door and the bird flies out and I'm standing at the doorway and I'm thinking, that's interesting. This feels like a metaphor that, maybe I feel like I've been this bird just like kind of crashing against the glass and not really being able to take flight with this vision. And maybe what I need is somebody just to open a door for me. And I would have gone on about my day and I might never have created Mother's Quest, but I noticed that the bird wasn't flying away. It was sort of just hopping around on the deck and I thought maybe it was injured. And then a few seconds later, I heard crashing again. And it turned out there was the second bird in the house.
Stop it.
Nope. And this time I was like, well, I know exactly what I need to do. I just need to open the door. And the second bird, so interestingly, like didn't fly right out. It like very slowly hopped out and actually took a picture of it. And I have a whole post about this on my website.
This is wild. Yeah.
It's wild. And at that point, I was like, okay, universe, clearly there's a bigger message here. I'm going to sit down and write this whole thing out. And so I put like my son at the table with like glue and paper. I never let him play with glue. I was like, do whatever you want with the glue. And I just sat there typing out this, this reflection of what had just happened. And I ended up posting on Facebook. And I was like, I declared in that moment, in that day, that I was going to create Mother's Quest. And I realized that that second bird, what it really represented for me was that nobody can open the door for me if I don't open the door first myself.
Yeah, boom. That's where we need to end right there because it's so perfect. No one can open the door for me if I don't first open the door for myself. You invited the opportunities and then you walked through the door. And from that, Mother's Quest was born.
Exactly. It turned out, I had taken a picture, so I was curious about what these birds were. Those birds were mourning doves, and they mate for life. And that's why the other one didn't leave. And if you look up what those birds represent, they represent motherhood.
Oh. So if you didn't have faith before,
right,
there couldn't be a more clear message of faith.
And there have definitely been days and moments where I'm like, what am I doing?
Right. I mean, who doesn't have them?
Yeah.
Who doesn't have them? Mm-hmm.
I do often go back to, how I felt in that moment and that sense of faith. And like, okay, there really is, I really am meant to do this. And the commitment that I made to myself that day that like, no, I'm really doing this.
That's the part that keeps you going when things are challenging, is that internal commitment to who we really are and to what we believe in and what we stand for and what we're here to create and do. And if there's one thing we could leave the listeners with, it really would be that for me, which is their own power, however it may look or whatever it may feel like or however distant they might feel from it at this time.
Yeah.
That there is something within each of us. And I fundamentally believe that. And I believe that of all people, regardless of background, we don't all have the same opportunity.
Right.
But we have the same like embers of flame inside of us to be of contribution and to offer something back if we can unlock those doors for ourselves. So that is an amazing way to frame it for all of us, that to anchor back into that story, to give you faith and to have you garner your own self-trust even when it feels daunting. Julie, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and for sharing your wisdom. And I'll make sure to link to all of the shows and resources that we talked about so people can keep learning from you and exploring their own quest alongside you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sage. That was an amazing conversation and definitely one that I feel enriched by too.
Loved having it. We'll talk more for sure.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day. Love your people. Honor your gifts. Until next time.